All right. Getting ready for that Assessor of Prior Learning interview, we're diving deep today into those interview questions. Think of this as your personal prep session. Not just the surface stuff. We're going to really dig into what the interviewer's looking for and how to show them you're the perfect fit.
It's really about going beyond just checking boxes. You need to show you get it, you understand the nuances of experience, and how it lines up with the qualification.
So kind of like a detective of skills and knowledge, uncovering those hidden talents and making the connections from someone's past to their future potential.
That's it. And that's what we're here to help you showcase. Ready to jump into some interview questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, here's one that often throws people. How do you determine the validity and authenticity of prior learning evidence?
It's like they're checking to see if you're thorough, but also like discerning.
Right.
You can't just take everything at face value.
Yeah, exactly. This is where you want to highlight your process, how you review evidence, emphasizing a meticulous approach. Mentioning things like cross-referencing with standards, maybe even specific techniques for verification.
So, instead of just saying, I'd check it out, you'd give them a more detailed picture.
Yeah.
For example, if someone claims project management expertise, you'd dive into their portfolio. Look for concrete examples, the methodologies, maybe even testimonials.
Exactly. Show them you're digging deep. And be ready for follow-ups like, have you ever encountered iffy evidence? How'd you handle it?
Oh, they'll throw you in the deep end. That's where those real-life examples come in handy.
Absolutely. And this is where RoleCatcher's a game changer. Their AI analyzes your practice answers and gives you feedback tailored to the role.
Like a personal interview coach in your pocket. Okay, question 2. How do you ensure fairness and objectivity in the assessment process? Ethics and impartiality, right?
You nailed it. It's the core of being an assessor.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people's careers, their dreams. You got to demonstrate that commitment to fairness and transparency.
So understanding things like unconscious bias and how you're committed to standardized criteria, that's huge.
Absolutely. Mentioning things like blind assessments or how you mitigate your own biases shows them you're serious about objectivity.
It's like that part in the career guide about maintaining industry standards and compliance. You're showing them you understand the weight of this role, how it impacts people's lives.
Right on. Don't be afraid to get specific either. If you've used diverse assessment methods or challenged your own assumptions in the past, those are gold.
Okay, next one. How do you handle situations where prior learning evidence is, well, insufficient or incomplete? This feels like a common one.
It definitely happens. The interviewer's looking at your communication skills, your problem solving. How do you navigate those tricky situations with grace?
So stay calm and show you have a plan for gathering more info.
All right, exactly. This is your time to shine. Mention conducting additional interviews, requesting more documents, or suggesting assessments to fill those gaps.
This could also be where you highlight your experience with different types of assessments. Like if you've done portfolio reviews, skills demonstrations, or even peer evaluations before.
It all shows you're adaptable, resourceful, ready for anything.
Next question. This one sounds official. How do you ensure the assessment process aligns with regulatory requirements and industry standards?
It is official. They need to know you understand the legal and ethical side of assessment. Show them your knowledge and that you're meticulous about following protocol.
So familiarity with legislation, best practices, any internal quality assurance you know.
Exactly. Mention specific regulations, professional development courses, audits you've been part of. Show them you're serious.
You're not just an assessor, you're a guardian of quality and fairness.
And they'll be listening for that confidence when you say it.
Yeah. Okay, ready for a bit of a curveball.
Bring it on.
How do you handle situations where there are conflicting pieces of evidence?
Oh, wow. That's tricky. So it's about how you handle those gray areas, right?
Yeah.
Yes. It's about critical thinking. How you evaluate credibility, make sound judgments under pressure.
Almost like a judge in a courtroom, weighing the evidence, making the call.
Love that analogy. And like a good judge, you're impartial, relying on evidence. You could talk about seeking clarification from the candidate, consulting with experts, cross-referencing with industry benchmarks.
Showing you have a system for those tough calls, and it goes back to those core values. Objectivity, fairness, seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about the person behind those qualifications, not just checking boxes. Speaking of which, this next question is crucial.
Okay, hit me with it.
How do you provide feedback to candidates on their assessments?
The feedback conversation. It's more than just the words, it's the delivery, right?
It's everything. You're
Yeah.
dealing with real people and their hopes for the future. Your delivery needs to be constructive, encouraging, empowering.
So using a strengths-based approach, focusing on growth rather than just pointing out the negatives.
Exactly. Start by acknowledging their efforts, their strengths. That sets the tone, even if there are areas for improvement.
And if you've got experience with mentoring or coaching, that's huge to mention here, right?
For sure. Shows you get the importance of guidance in learning, and you can emphasize how you tailor feedback to each person's goals.
Awesome. Okay, next question. How do you maintain confidentiality and privacy? Seems like a given, but it's important to address.
It's huge. You're showing you understand data protection, ethical guidelines, the seriousness of confidentiality.
So highlighting familiarity with data protection laws, secure storage, your organization's specific protocols, right?
Yes, be specific. Mention password-protected files, anonymized data when sharing, your understanding of informed consent. It shows you're serious.
It's about respect for the information, building trust.
Exactly. Okay, last question in the set, and it's a big one. How do you ensure the assessment process is inclusive and accessible to all candidates?
Incredibly important. Everyone deserves a fair shot, no matter what.
Absolutely. This is about equity. The interviewer wants to see you're not just aware of barriers, but actively working to remove them.
So you talk about your understanding of different learning styles, disabilities, cultural backgrounds, anything that might create obstacles.
Yes, but awareness isn't enough. You need action. Be ready to adapt your approach.
Like providing materials in different formats, being flexible with assessment times, incorporating assistive technologies.
Exactly. And creating an inclusive environment. Inclusive language, sensitivity to cultural nuances, a safe space for everyone to shine.
Recognizing that everyone's experience is valuable, and our job is to create a system that lets them show it. We've covered a lot with these questions, but there's more to acing this interview than just the answers.
You're right. Let's look at some insights from RoleCatcher's Career Guide. It can give some great context and help you connect those dots for the interviewer. One of the things that often comes up is this idea of transferable skills. We touched on it a bit when we talked about experience, but it's worth looking a little closer.
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes the most relevant experience isn't always obvious right off the bat.
For sure. Think about someone who's been super involved in, say, volunteer work. They might have project management experience, leadership, budgeting skills, all from outside a traditional job.
It's like you're putting together a puzzle, right?
Yeah,
Looking for those hidden pieces of experience that wouldn't be on a resume.
exactly. And RoleCatcher's Guide really stresses how important it is for assessors to be good at spotting these people. It's about recognizing that experience from volunteering, community stuff, hobbies, even life challenges. It all has value.
That's where your expertise as an assessor really comes in. Being able to connect those dots between experiences and the actual skills needed for a qualification. That's like being a career detective.
Love it. And remember, the interviewer wants to see that why you get that. You understand how important transferable skills are. So when you're answering questions about evaluating experience, don't be shy about giving examples of how you've spotted hidden talents before.
So going into the interview with a few examples ready to go of how you've seen transferable skills play out in real life, that's super helpful.
Totally. Makes your answers stronger, shows them you've actually thought about this stuff. Now, speaking of thinking outside the box, the career guide also mentions adjacent career paths. Ever thought about those?
I've heard the term, but what does that even mean in terms of being an assessor of prior learning?
It means recognizing that someone might be a really good fit for a different but related role because of their skills. Like someone who's great at assessment might also be awesome as a career counselor, a trainer, even an educational consultant.
So it's not just about assessing for one specific thing. It's about understanding their potential, how their skills could work in different fields.
Exactly. And knowing about those adjacent paths can really help you in the interview. Shows you're thinking big picture. How assessment fits into the whole world of education and professional development.
That's a really good point. Shows you're thinking long-term for yourself and the people you'd be assessing. And it actually ties into something else from the guide that caught my eye. The part about how even entry-level assessor roles can lead to leadership positions. But, there was also something in the pros and cons section that really resonated with me, and it said that this role can be, quote, emotionally demanding.
That's so true, and it's important to acknowledge it's not always easy. You're dealing with people's livelihoods, their hopes, and sometimes their disappointments, too.
So how can someone prepare for that emotional side? What advice would you give to someone going into this interview who might be asked about that really human part of being an assessor?
Self-awareness is key. You got to know it's okay to be affected by people's stories, by the decisions you make. You're human, but you also need to have good ways to handle that.
Like setting boundaries, having a support system with colleagues, maybe even doing some mindfulness stuff.
Exactly. And in the interview, showing that self-awareness by saying something like, I know this role can be tough emotionally, but I'm committed to taking care of myself so I can be my best for the candidates. That goes a long way.
That's a really mature response.
Yeah.
Shows them you're not just there to assess, you're there to support people.
Yeah.
And it actually takes us back to those core values we keep coming back to: objectivity, fairness, and really seeing the value in each person's experience.
You got it. And that's where those values connect with something else we've talked about. The role of technology RoleCatcher's AI tools can be super valuable here.
Definitely. We've mentioned it, but I'd love to hear more about how RoleCatcher helps people tailor their answers and practice for this specific role.
Okay, so imagine having your own personal interview coach, available 24/7. That's basically what RoleCatcher gives you. You can practice answering those common interview questions, and the AI looks at your responses. It gives feedback on your content, how you're saying it, even your tone of voice.
Wow, that's wild. So it's really fine-tuning your approach, making sure you're coming across the right way.
Yeah, it can even tell if you're, like, being too formal or too casual. And if you're using video for practice, it can even analyze your body language.
Whoa, so it's like having that feedback right there,
Yeah.
telling you if you need to adjust how you're presenting yourself.
Exactly. And that kind of feedback, it's huge. When you really need to nail that first impression.
It's that balance, right? Being professional, but still authentic.
Totally. RoleCatcher helps you find that sweet spot.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've gone through those interview questions, the ins and outs of transferable skills, even those adjacent career paths. Plus, we talked about the emotional side of this role and how tech like RoleCatcher can really help you prep. But before we wrap up, let's think about the future for a sec. The working world is changing so fast. How do you think the assessor role will change with it?
It's a great question. It feels like a role that's going to keep evolving, especially with the way things are moving towards skills-based hiring and all those micro-credentials. It makes you wonder how those will play into evaluating prior learning down the line.
Right. I mean, think about it. We might start seeing more focus on skills from online learning and those alternative credentials and the assessment tools themselves. Who knows, maybe VR simulations to check out those hands-on skills, or even AI that can analyze a candidate's whole portfolio.
Kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is, but you know what? I think no matter how much tech comes into play, those core things that make a great assessor, those will always be important. Being able to see beyond just what's on paper, really understanding the value of all those different experiences someone brings to the table, and then really championing the potential you see in them. That human touch, it's never going away.
I love that. That's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone out there getting ready to dive into this world, remember what we talked about today. Prep for those questions. Really think about what makes your experience valuable. And don't be afraid to let that passion for learning shine through.
And don't forget, RoleCatcher has your back. Use those tools to practice, work on your delivery, and build that confidence you need to totally rock that interview.
You got this. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning.